Hello everyone and welcome to e-commerce live. This is a series I put together. My name's Lucia Dello and my business is called Dello Insights. Last winter I interviewed 21 different e-commerce experts and asked them what had excited them most, what they'd learnt from their data last year, they're planning to use in their business over the next 12 months. I then compiled that into a report, which I'll put the link on in the chat in a minute. But from the report I then said to all the experts, why not come on a webinar with me, go into detail around your tip, explain who it's for, how to use it, and then so we can use it ourselves in our business. Today I'm very excited. I'm joined by Roffe and by Whalley. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hello, I'm Anna. Thanks for having us today this year. It's been really exciting to be part of your very widespread report that you've been doing, so thanks for that. So I'm Anna. I run an independent consultancy and I work with merchandising and planning teams to strengthen that capability. So that looks like working with businesses, looking at process, structure and trading strategy to set out a really clear, consistent approach. So that's sustainable frameworks and clear processes that allow consistency and clarity throughout the business, allowing them to move forward at pace. So if you want to know more, just reach out and get in touch with me.
Thank you very much, Anna.
And I'm Matt Roffe. I work as a fractional marketing director specialising in e-commerce. I work as an independent consultant and also with the Growth Society, who offer flexible ways of working for high scale e-commerce businesses. My focus is helping brands tackle profitability and making sure that they grow in a sustainable fashion rather than focusing on short-term tactics.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Well, that's really exciting to have you here today. So I think we'll go on and start with the questions. So Anna, I was going to talk to you about your tip really. So what does a product-led data strategy look like?
Yeah, so I'm really passionate about the product. So really, for me, understanding what the customer wants and how that's aligned with the brand strategy is really important. And the data can support that, but it really has to tie back to that product and where you want that brand to move forward. So in a smaller retailer, that might be looking at that data just to begin with and understanding what's working. And as the business matures, there'll be different layers of complexity. So understanding with that product, there might be different profiles on different channels or within your range. So really understanding that, but it has to tie back to the product. There's no point saying, oh, this data says this product sold really well. Well, actually, is it because it didn't work and we marked it down and it's not really selling at a profit? Is that really what our customer wants? Or am I selling profit? It's sold really well and it's actually what our customer's looking for and why they want to come with us and how that brand is going to continue and move forward. So it's really about aligning that product strategy back to where the brand wants to go and using that data to drive those insights to make sure it's profitable. I really agree with what Matt said. It has to be about the profit, not just about chasing sales.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Anna. That's a really good explanation. So why don't people do a product-led strategy as much as they could? What kind of holds people back from this approach?
I think sometimes they'll just get distracted and we talk about data and it can be really overwhelming. It's like, oh right, we're doing this, oh we're doing that, oh we're going to go over here and do this, and really just to keep that focus is really important and making sure everything's geared up to that. So whether that's how you look at the data in terms of reporting, are you looking at it in a way that's going to drive insights that you can tie back to the strategy is really important. So I don't think it's never a lack of it. People will all say, oh, I'm doing it, but it just gets distracted in the business sometimes. So I think it's about keeping that focus. That's why I would see.
And I know we've been talking quite a lot about AI, and you're kind of saying, I think you're very much saying that AI has come along and it can address some of these challenges that retailers are facing. Would you like to maybe explain what kind of challenges you see where AI is really helping people?
So it's really interesting that you've said that. So I would say if you'd have asked me 18 months ago, I was like, oh, I'm not really sure, AI, it's coming along, but in the last few months it's really gaining pace and it's very interesting. So I would say a huge part of the benefit is repetitive tasks that you're doing in businesses where you're pulling that same information, reports or your anything that's repetitive and taking a long time, or even sifting through data, that is where AI can straight away come in and support that. But even before we think about AI, we can think about automation. So am I structured so that my data is clear to be able to see insights moving forward? So I think there's a lot that businesses can benefit from it. But for me, where businesses can benefit the most is that first pass. It's looking at those repetitive tasks. Look at your week, see what you're doing each week that's taking time, or month, however it might be. And it's those tasks. It's an instant win. I would also say have a look at why you're doing those tasks and why you're taking the time. Is it something just before we say this and say sweepingly AI can come in and support it, but is it actually something you need to be doing? So I think it's always good to have a look at your processes and understand where you can improve. But the time saving and the repetition and exception reporting. So if we're sifting through lots of data, and actually we're just looking for those outliers and those exceptions, AI, again, it's a great way to just pull those to the forefront. I don't know if that's the same for you, Matt, with things that you're seeing.
No, 100% I'd agree. Some of the more monotonous tasks that we all hate doing, some of the heavy lifting, I think that's where the real strength is. I think businesses still need to kind of look at how they verify that and not assume and take it at face value straight away. And build a process for QA. I think the quality, as you said, has jumped on, massively since. I started really kind of digging into AI and LLMs probably around about, must be 2-3 years ago, when I had some downtime. And where it's come from, it's just the speed of change. It's so fast. So for businesses that can be hugely overwhelming, and sort of, so I think you referenced having almost like a bit of a strategy for it in terms of how you're going to use it, how you're going to integrate it with your systems, and it kind of leads on to my point as well, which I'll lead on to in a second.
Sure, that's really helpful. So Anna, in terms of merchandising, are there some repetitive tasks you can think which are quick wins, or ones that people would really think of automating?
Oh yeah, and it'll depend on the business. So some businesses that might be preparing reports. I think if you're spending hours running reports, it's a bit of a red flag for me straight off. So I would just put that out there. But even if it's looking at repeat orders, are you going through that line by line and proposing actions for how much to buy or demand forecasting? That's a huge win that AI can support with. So that for me is a really big one. Looking at pricing as well for markdown dynamics, if that's important for your business, that is a huge area. Absolutely forgot both there. Allocation and replenishment. So again, getting your stock out. If you're an e-commerce business, perhaps that's not something for you, but that's another huge benefit. So looking at where that stock is going to be best placed to make maximum sales, and that might be across channels, but also might be in store locations. So, but the really big one, I would say, aside from reporting, which is massive, is demand planning is a really, really key one, I think, for merchandising and supply chain.
So if you think that you've got an area, if someone's listening to this report and thought, yep, one of those things really, really resonates with me, I think I need a tool or automation to do that, where should they start looking? How would you kind of gather the information together? Because there's so many options, aren't there?
There are. So I would say before that, to take a step back and really ask yourself, what is it, one of those things that's resonating, and why? How does that fit in with my business model? Because you absolutely don't want to go ahead and just take where you are now and think that's what I need, but just think about where you need to go, and is it going to fulfil that need? And then when you're really clear on what it is you're looking for, then I would say go out. There's trade shows, there's people to ask. I'm sure we're all open to people asking questions, but more than that, I would say go and ask your peer network. What are they using? Why didn't it work for them? Like, honestly, everyone says it's good, but really, is it giving you what you need? And I think being clear about what you're actually looking for will help you. If you go to a trade show, everything's like really shiny and amazing, and we do all these amazing things, but when it gets to the nuts and bolts of what your business needs and how you need it to work for you, is it going to fulfill that need? So I think being really crystal clear about what you need is really important. And sometimes getting a second opinion, but definitely I would say get your peer network out there and ask specific questions that are quite detailed. And don't be dazzled by all the shiny stuff. Everything can do everything. It's amazing, but really, is it going to drive my business forward in the way that I want it to and help me? I would say is a really important factor there.
I think it's underestimated as well, the amount of time it takes to look at all the different options, evaluate them, even before you select the one you want to implement. Then you have to go through the whole implementation. And as Matt said, you then get all the controls off the back end, don't you, around it's actually doing what I wanted it to do. So
yeah,
most people are still relatively light users of LLM. So there's a lot of noise in terms of usage, and I think trust in terms of actually what the right noise is, and actually kind of what to kind of to consider implementing into a business. After you verified it, etc. I think that's half of the problem, and that's down to the speed of it. It's just happening at such a velocity that I don't think we've seen with anything else in terms of tech. I'm probably very wrong there, but it just feels like at a very public level, it's just moving very, very fast.
I think that's a really good point about the verifying. I think start small and completely agree with what Matt said. That verifying the data, and are you asking it the right questions? Are we saying, oh, we want to get our demand planning, or actually we want to manage our stock turn, or being quite specific about what you're needing with the solution, and verifying it and seeing if it's right for you. They always liken it to a new team member, don't they? Say, oh, AI, it's like a new team member. You've got to train it, you've got to work with it and make sure it's driving the results you need. And I think just starting small and just building on it. But I definitely think ask your network and see what other people have experienced, and it's really valuable to have someone that you can actually reach out to and talk to about it, I think, rather than just, as you said, that it's like in the public eye, it's in your face sort of thing, but actually how is it working for people?
We know as well when we speak to retailers, they're so overwhelmed as well with just the day-to-day running the business, and the strategy on top, and the operations and the communication, and then suddenly every single part of the business could have an AI solution that fits into it. And how do you possibly evaluate all of that and work out which is your priority and where to go? It's just phenomenal, isn't it, the amount of pressure and change and speed and dazzling that goes on, as you say, Matt. So
that's it. And it's random story. I bumped into a guy. I was coming home from London probably about a month ago, and we were talking about AI, and he was saying to me, because he was more in the kind of technology kind of side of the world, and he was saying everyone's calling it AI, but actually it's LLMs. That's what we ought to be referring to this as, because it's not, it's still based on inputs and outputs. It's not really quite as artificial as the actual term would make it to be. So I think some of the kind of the noise and the kind of the hubbub around AI is almost kind of confusing things to a degree.
I would absolutely agree with that, and I think if you look at some of the automation processes, they are perhaps describe them more as workflows. Yeah. Either way, it's an automation that's stopping your repetitive tasks. So again, is that giving you a benefit, some automation of giving you that exception reporting? Is that helping you save time to drill into what you need to do? It's giving you the insights to act. I'd still say it's a win, but yeah, I fully agree with that.
That you need to work out, is your benefit going to be cost? Is it going to be the time saving, your resources? What kind of benefit do you want out? And how do you measure that benefit as well? Because you're not looking at just one metric, are you? There's a lot of different benefits you might get. And how important is it to you? Does it matter if it's extra cost, if it saves time for your resources?
Yeah.
Or if you've got spare resources, therefore it's less of a saving because you've actually got the time to do it, although it's not totally efficient, You've got to evaluate every single thing, haven't you?
Yeah. I think that goes back to knowing what you want to drive your business forward and being really clear on that, because I think that is so important. And once maybe it's time and investment now, but if that's set you up in a position to scale, then that's a huge benefit. But again, it goes back to what your specific needs are for the business.
What about the role of the management teams? Because I assume that you could, you don't want to just implement something one part really well and then the rest of the team not being aware of it, and it's got to think about the bigger picture as well. You kind of need it to be brought in at a kind of senior level, have that kind of synchronicity across the business, don't you, as well, Anna?
Yeah, it's really interesting in different businesses how they'll approach this. So there might be perhaps more established businesses where there's already systems in place. So you've got a legacy. So then bringing something in, how are we going to know it's going to work? We've got a process, and there's more risk there. Whereas if you're starting out or more agile, then you don't have that baggage with you. So bringing something in new that's cutting edge or not even cutting edge, but something new you can do perhaps with more agility. In terms of embedding it, I would say 100%. So that goes back to the business understanding. I keep feeling like I'm repeating myself, but it really is important about understanding what you need to move forward. So from the management team, but also, is that what's actually happening with the team? Actually, is the problem with the team because they're working in silos and they're not communicating? Before we go and put a huge new sticky plaster over it and say, it's all fixed. Actually, are those processes, is there something else going on there? But really, the whole business needs to move with it, and it needs to embed. You hear stories about large organisations bringing things in that just doesn't work, and then they're like, millions spent, and then we move on. And, that's shocking, really. But it happens. So, yeah, it really has to be... it depends what the appetite is for the business. So it's not always management don't want to bring it in, but the teams do. That it can be a mix in all different businesses, but it needs to be aligned and it needs to answer the question. But it has to be embedded, otherwise it's a complete and utter waste for everybody.
Excellent. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think that's really good advice for everyone. Matt, I'm going to move on to you slightly. So I know you say that now AI's matured into this kind of sophisticated marketing partner, and we can use it to drive the outputs in the business. But what does that mean in practice? How has the change happened, and what can we now do?
Yeah, so the way that I use it personally, I'm focusing on less replacing things. So I'm not using it to kind of replace my audience work, my market segmentation, etc. I'm using it to improve those things, and sometimes to kind of almost be a sparring partner on idea building. That's the way that I've kind of functionally I've been doing this heavily with clients for the last sort of 6 months, and it's improved my speed, it's improved my my personal output by having this kind of tool that I can use to kind of improve myself, essentially. And that's the way I think as marketers we ought to be using, and in businesses kind of across roles, we ought to be using kind of AI to enhance our kind of latent abilities and kind of amplify them.
So in practice, you're kind of, what you're doing, you may be using ChatGPT then for prompts to give you kind of inspirational takes on things you want to investigate. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, so typically what I'll do, I'll say if I'm working through a strategy project, I'll have all of my kind of key deliverables that I know I need to kind of go through, and kind of key ideas that I know I need to build. I'll upload those kind of documented pieces of work into a custom GPT, and then you've got this constant kind of input that you're kind of constant brain that you're building. So then when you're getting down to kind of some of the things like tactical execution, you can refer back or even share it with colleagues, for example, so they can dig into your thinking. Day to day, that, as I said, that's improved my speed, that's improved kind of communication, and the projects that I'm working on have seen the benefits from a performance perspective because of that as well.
So different, isn't it? I've got Anna to go at the very, very tactical execution, and you're on this kind of, you're kind of more actually applying your processes and getting the processes working and showing that knowledge. And that's the other thing about AI, which is so hard to grasp, isn't it? It could be so many different ways that people use it and focus on. So
yeah, that's it. And I think to your question a second ago, like, it's well known that different LLMs are better at different jobs. So I've been testing out. I think Gemini perhaps had it first, but it was the deep research kind of function. That's been a real kind of game changer if I want to kind of very quickly get underneath the skin of a topic or a business. If I'm pitching, for example, I will quickly run a search through. I think I've come down to Gemini is probably the better kind of candidate for this.
Just quickly going to make a note of that.
Yeah. all sorts of different views. I know Claude does it as well. I know
use Claude, yeah.
GPT does it as well. Perplexity as well. But to get that using deep research to kind of and position it as a market research report for a brand. Get that data, and even if you don't use any of that, you've got some of the high level headwinds, tailwinds, all of that kind of information that you can then go and verify yourself and extrapolate yourself. I'm not using that as the output, but I'm using it to give me some kind of starting point and direction, which if you were going in completely fresh on that, you would it would take a lot more time. So time saving, and it's you're quite often getting to the answer quicker.
How long did it take to learn your brain or learn your model? So I assume as your results have gone on, it's got better and better with you. Was it a long training process?
It's a real kind of testing process with actually the quality of it as well, because the quality isn't always there. There's some tasks like I've tried it for forecasting, and it's absolutely awful. It no matter how good the prompt and how specific the prompt you give it, it's still missing like phasing, or it's missing some particular element. Forecasting is very, very tricky, and
it is.
There's lots of different views on it anyway. So that's kind of almost translating into the LLMs when you're using them. But I think as I say, you're feeding it the information and almost sometimes the people that inspire. So you're using their kind of ways of thinking, of which are your kind of ways of thinking. So you're using an abundance of information to feed the brain.
So do you think that, I know there's a lot of talk at the moment, Matt, isn't there, about the marketing world and AI will take all the jobs from marketing. Are you kind of seeing that starting to happen, do you think? Or
I think I don't think it will. There's some jobs that I think are more susceptible than others. We're certainly seeing a lot more kind of video creative output more recently, which is interesting from a creative perspective. I think the jobs that are kind of, I say at risk, I don't see it happening. Well, I don't know, if I'm honest, on this front, how soon, because the speed of change has been ridiculous. But if you look at kind of the direction that Meta wants to take, or has been talking about, taking Advantage Plus, where you've kind of got this, system where you upload everything for the marketer. It's, essentially a one-stop shop for advertising. That kind of takes out, some, definitely takes out freelancers, definitely takes out sort of, people that are focused on the I say the technical, the channel specialists. You'll still need people that are kind of specialist within the creative field. You know, certainly from an emotional point of view, I think that's, you know, whilst I've seen some pretty good sort of AI, you know, examples of showing emotion, you know, that's still going to be kind of taught emotion, so not kind of any of the, you know, that's still going to be an area where it's not going to kind of show up fully, I think, which is where humans will still kind of, you know, very much be super important. Will it take over fully? I've no clue, but I'd like to think not. I think we're highly, you know, capable machines ourselves, and sometimes it's just, you know, we may need to go through an evolution ourselves, you know, to kind of, you know, one thing, you know, I've been thinking about a lot is, you know, in marketing, the level of knowledge is kind of, you know, almost flattened by AI, because everyone can kind of, you know, with a minimal knowledge themselves can kind of, you know, essentially Google or, you know, search what would have been, you know, years of experience and years of knowledge built up, you know. So what becomes then important is experience. Sort of, if knowledge is flattened, experience is going to be more important than ever, and is going to have a premium associated with it, you know. So, you know, that kind of, you know, we'd look at creative and anything that has been kind of, you know, done by a human, eventually may have some kind of premium on it, you know.
Yeah, I think it's the nuances as well, though, within that.
Yeah.
That's, you know, it's flat, but actually there's a little bit here and there's a little bit here, and that's where the edge is, I think, and that's where the connection is.
Definitely. No,
Certainly other guests have talked, you know, I think Louise Beasley said that she runs these ad campaigns, not that they're running through AI, she's on them 2-3 times a day checking what it's doing, that actually it's doing what they want them to do and it's actually performing, and if it's not, they need to work out why it's not happening. So suddenly all these jobs around monitoring what AI is doing, rather than doing the execution, they're now monitoring the execution of the AI to check it's actually working. And then I was talking with Chloe and Anne as well, and they were talking again about, you know, the complexity now of it all and having this bigger picture and being able to tie it all together. And the skills to do that in terms of the more technical performance analysis, you know, that's got more and more and more challenging as everything's come along. So
but
constant evolution.
It's giving you that insight, but then knowing what to do. You know, what are your levers? How do you manipulate it in a way that's going to help you move forward, not just. Not just like giving you the insight. It's like, well, actually, how am I going to use it to best inform what I want to do moving forward that's right for me and my business. I think it's still really key. So I just think it's going to be different. I'm not going to miss spending hours sifting through data, looking at every single line to do something. I think those days are gone.
Lovely. Right. I'm going to finish with one more question. Do we think we're at peak AI? Are we still at the bottom of the curve and going up? Or are we going down? You know, what are your two thoughts? Consolidations now, or more and more and more expanses?
I think we're missing the fact that we've spent this chat talking about automation in whatever form it might be.
Mm-hmm.
There's still a lot of Excel out there and spreadsheets and businesses that are doing stuff. So I think we're well off it actually in real terms. That's my experience anyway. I still go to all these amazing trade shows or go to these events, and someone will always tap me on the shoulder and go, I'm still in Excel. I'm like, yeah, a lot of people are. So I think we've got a long way to go. I personally, so Matt, you've talked about how you're integrating and using AI to support yourself. I'm on a journey with that as well, you know, and I think in real terms we're nowhere near it. I think we're still just beginning. Personally, I don't know what you think, Matt.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's I think I can't remember if it's on the Gartner hype cycle or not. I'm pretty sure it will be. But if you look at the hype cycle, and last time I checked it, which was kind of a year ago, they produced these yearly reports, and I think it was on, you know, the lower side of, you get like this, what do they call it? The trough of disillusionment, when stuff starts kind of not being quite as people had expected, but you get the hype kind of period. Mm-hmm. And I think we're kind of coming out of that, and I think it's a slightly extended hype period just because of the period, kind of how fast it is. But I think at some point we'll kind of hit you know, right, we've kind of gone as far as the tech can take us right now, and it's this other kind of like theory of, you know, creativity and technology. When one swings this way, the other has to catch up, and I feel like we're kind of at the stage where the creativity is kind of caught up with the technology. The technology will swing back the other way and kind of evolve again. So it's, you know, I think we're just touching the surface, as I said. I don't think we're going to.
It's a shiny word, isn't it? Don't you think it's like? Yeah. So everyone's like, oh, AI, this, but I think, you know, let's just take a step back. Are we talking about AI? Are we talking about automation? How are we moving forward? What's the process? Yeah, I think we're well off. What was the stat you had on the LinkedIn post? Was it about how
Yes.
AI is going to move into businesses? You had a great stat. I've actually just forgotten it, but
no, I can't remember it either.
it's just like, you know, it's progressing at a certain rate, and I think it'd be interesting to look back and see if that actually happened.
I think the spend I see from the tech companies around the amount of money being spent on automation AI solutions is phenomenal, isn't it? You know, all the investment's gone into that in a big way.
People want to see it, don't they?
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, well, thank you very much. That's amazing points to finish on and lots to digest. So, thank you very much. I shall finish it now. Bye.
Bye.